Is reading books really enough for a literature study? Yes and no. Today, I want to share a little bit about the Charlotte Mason method of using literature in the classroom. Hello, my name is Heather. I am mama to soon to be 8. I am homeschooling 5 of my kids, and we have primarily used Charlotte Mason methods for 6 of our 8 years. Um, the thing that I wanted to talk about today is literature because I have seen so many homeschool moms in social media world asking, "Oh, what literature guides do you use? What do we do for language arts?" And that's why I'm kind of tackling all these components of language arts. There's poetry and all kinds of wonderful things. I'll try to get on and share about those at another time, but I do share about dictation and recitation already. And today I want to talk about literature because it's one that I think a lot of homeschool parents, especially if you were in a traditional school model, or possibly, as it was my case, was an educator before, that you think, I'm going to study literature, then I need to have all the discussion questions and the worksheets and make all the character mapping and vocabulary lists and all of these things. And the truth is, you really don't. And Charlotte Mason says a lot about it. And my take on literature is a little bit different than Charlotte Mason's coursework because she only would tie it in with history, and I would very much do that as well. But she just does it a little different. So if you want to find that out, you can look it in School Education Book 3 in Charlotte Mason's volumes, and it talks more about her coursework there. And that's not what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about literature in general, because honestly, a lot of people say Charlotte Mason, they're like, okay, so you read the book and that's it. We are a literature based curriculum. That's what we use for our homeschool. Everything is literature based. We're using living, real books that are interesting, that are written by people interested and knowledgeable about the subject, or are firsthand sources. We are using mostly literature and then some firsthand sources. That's what we're doing. We're not using textbooks in our home. However, we're not just reading the book and then chuck it, you're done. We do a little bit more than that, but we don't have to have some big discussion panel. We don't have to have a whole bunch of worksheets and things. Not that those are inherently wrong, but they do kind of squash some of the joy and the beauty in the learning and just some of the learning. So I wanted to give you a quick example of a personal, somewhat personal example, and then also tell you what Charlotte Mason says. Now, my husband is not known to be a reader. He has actually started reading much more, but he is not known to be a reader. But one book that he talks about in his high school is his teacher who was obsessed, loved To Kill a Mockingbird. Now, I have not read To Kill a Mockingbird. Somehow that got skipped in my education, and I am starting it right now. But he said um, that he remembers the book and he enjoyed the book. But he remembers most is that the teacher hyped up and harped and pulled apart and pieced and talked about that very introductory sentence, so much so that because it is foreshadowing in the story, it kind of ruined the book and it took out the surprise of the foreshadowing later on. And it kind of detracted that. It took that and stole that moment from their readers. And I feel like that right there is a prime example of what sometimes these over excited lessons. I know as a parent, we get excited, especially if it's a good book and we want to talk about it, but we can ruin some of that for our readers and also take away the learning aspect for them. For example, I was in advanced programs all throughout high school and middle school and elementary school, and I remember several books, especially come high school. I don't remember the book so much as I remember the teacher belaboring and taking apart and nuancing all of the things. Let's take apart this character and let's map them and let's know everything about them, and then let's do that with the plot line, and we're going to do that with the every aspect of the book was just shredded into these pieces so that I could not enjoy the book. I could not even retain information about the book. There is not a single book that I learned and read in my high school curriculum, my advanced high school curriculum, that I can tell you very well about, nor that I enjoyed. And I am a book lover. I have gone back and reread some of these books and learned that, oh, I actually do enjoy these books, but They had just been destroyed in the moment with all of that picking apart that was led by the teacher, and then I was to respond to. Now, why do I mention that? Because in a Charlotte Mason home, we're not going to do that. Not that having a vocabulary list is wrong. If you are reading Homer's Odyssey for the first time, I feel like you may need a vocabulary list. Some of these books you really might, and that's okay. But if we're taking so much time to pick apart parts of the story in a specified manner that is focused by what the teacher got out of it, we are taking away opportunities from our children. Now, let me share a little bit of Charlotte Mason's actual words. Now, this is home education, which really talks about educating our children up to age 9. So you think, well, that's pretty early, but what does that have to do with it? I wanted to share a couple of her thoughts on reading in general. Now I'll try to pop those up here for you as well so you can follow along. One of the most common quotes is one of her favorites, and it's the most common and monstrous defect in the education of the day is that children fail to acquire the habit of reading. That is backed up by so many studies these days, and colleges across the country are sharing how their students don't know how to read. So it is important that we teach our children to read, but what are we reading? We want them to be reading good quality books. And the purpose we're going for here, if you skip down on page 227 in volume 1, is the child must express what he feels to be the author's meaning. The child is doing that. A lot of times when we do our worksheet-based educations, our literature guides, discussion questions, and things like that, it is teacher focused. It's what I found out from it. Whereas what my take on the book may be vastly different. My connections may be vastly different from my child's connections. Not that mine are invalid, but what if we instead have our child narrate and tell back what they read, either orally or written, and then we discuss that? Because then our child has a chance to make those connections, to make those realizations, to decipher what they read first before we interpose what we have thought. And as you go on, there's so much more that Charlotte Mason says about reading in all of her volumes. As you can imagine with a literature-based curriculum, it's going to be the primary focus. But just remember this. A child has not begun his education until he has acquired the habit of reading to himself with interest and pleasure, books fully on the level with his intelligence. We want our children to be focused on these things. We want them to be able to read a book and to focus on it. I am reading this for the very first time. I know my advanced curriculum left a lot of classics out. And I'm amazed with it, and I love it, and I really, really want to go talk to my high schooler who is starting to read it this next term. But I don't want to take away her joy. I don't want to take away her shock and awe in this story. And so instead, what I can do is I can tell my husband, I can write notes, I can do those things. But when it comes time for her to read it, she is going to read her chapters, do her written narrations or her oral narrations, and tell me what she read. Now, because she has been doing Charlotte Mason for a while, she has moved past just the sequential events. If you're just starting out in your literature studies and you're reading, what can I say, Anna Green Gables, okay, then by all means, if they're just giving you a sequence of events, that is perfectly appropriate in your first beginning parts of narration journey and literature journey. However, they should start to progress where they're making their own connections. This reminds me of, I wonder if, I noticed. These kind of things should start to work their way into both their oral and written narrations. If not, then you may have some of those leading questions. And you, like I say in one of my other videos, you can find questions for narration all over the internet. Ask them what the character was. Does this character remind you of someone else? What was the setting like? Was it moody? Did it feel like it was a joyful time? Try to give them some more open-ended ones than that one. But you want to lead them to think further about the text rather than something that could be written down as a multiple choice question. Rather than diagramming out complex character connections, ask them, so who are those characters in A Midnight Summer Night's Dream, and who goes with who? and they'll start to explain it to you. Now, I will point out, as always in Charlotte Mason methods, oral will be much easier. They can much more easily tell you. But over time, it will progress and be able to tell you that in writing as well. And that is so much more valuable than being able to answer a few multiple choice questions, draw some diagrams, and things like that. When they come across vocabulary words, have them come and tell you, and you can tell them the definition or introduce how to use a dictionary to them. They are wonderful ways to use those components that we associate with literature study without doing literature guides, anything that you really need to prepare in advance other than read the book. And so I do say, if you are looking at Charlotte Mason and considering it, and you don't know what to do for your language arts program, you really do only need books for it. Books and a notebook. And that is really all you need to have a successful career and study in literature. Now, you as the parent will want to do some pre-reading, and you may even need to go into figuring out how to ask better questions and use the Socratic method yourself. But that is really all you need is a book, good books, and some notebooks to do your written narrations in eventually. I hope that this has encouraged you in your language arts endeavors, that you don't need all the trimmings, and that it really can be done simply and actually cheaply for your family as a whole. And this is the method we use in our home. All of my children, from my first grader, who is currently being read to as she develops those reading skills, all the way up to my high schooler. So I encourage you, try the Charlotte Mason method of choosing good books and narrating rather than trying out the newest fangled literature guide. I hope that this has helped you if you are confused. And if you have any questions, please pop them down below and I will try to answer it. And I will hopefully be continuing this literature, language arts focus and talking about poetry and Shakespeare in future videos. But if there is a language arts component that you are just dying to know how we approach it in our Charlotte Mason home, please let me know and I will try to put that on the agenda. Thank you so much for watching and have a blessed day.